Miracle at Camp Friendship. Chapter 14. Hobo Stew. It took about 15 more minutes to hike to the place where we were having our cookout, and gratefully it was nearly all downhill. The trail veered south from the high ridge and wound down into a wide canyon. We knew it was south because Ronnie, of course, pulled out his compass to remind us. I was thinking more highly of that compass too. It might be nice to have one of my own. The sun was shining almost overhead, and my stomach was growling. Before long, most of us had taken off our jackets and tied them around our waists. In some places, the trail was pretty steep, and our feet slid on loose stones. The challenge of getting down the steep trail safely made us feel more like real hikers, and it kept us on our toes also. It was a great idea to have a buddy. At times, all of us needed help, and buddies could hold on to each other. "We're almost there," called Mr. Friendson from the front of our troop. "Is everyone doing okay?" "Yes," most of us called back. I did notice that Pastor Gentle was really leaning on his walking stick or fishing pole, whichever it was. He used it to keep his balance and to test for loose stones. His face was flushed and covered with beads of perspiration. Obviously, hiking was not something he did every weekend. "Why did you come on the retreat, Pastor Gentle?" asked J. Michael with some concern in his voice. He was right beside his pastor, but he couldn't have done much had Pastor Gentle slipped. "Maybe somebody else could have come in your place." "Don't worry, J. Michael," the pastor said, taking a quick gasp of air. "I'll be fine." He puffed and grunted some more. "I guess I forgot how steep this hiking trail was. Whew!" He stopped, pulled off his hat, and wiped his sweating forehead. "I'm glad I came, though." He took a quick sip from his canteen, put his hat back on, and started on down the trail. "This has brought back many memories. And it has been good to see Aunt Ruth and Uncle Jake again. The only sad thing has been to see how the camp has fallen into disrepair. There is no way they will be able to continue this ministry unless someone helps them." While Pastor Gentle was talking, I noticed some things around us had changed. The air was cooler and, faintly at first, then more clearly, I could hear rushing water. The trail soon became level and wider. Finally, we were in a clearing under some huge pines. A small, clear mountain stream was gushing downhill over many rocks. No picture could have been more beautiful. God is a wonderful artist and creator. "Oh, this is gorgeous," gasped Miss Content, catching her breath. "It's perfect for our cookout. What do you want us to do to help, Mr. Friendson?" "Nothing just yet," he said. "Take a rest. I'll let you know when we're ready to work." Most of us sprawled on the heavy blanket of pine needles that covered the area. Then it hit me. "Needle," I whispered to Ronnie. "That's one of the things on our list. Mr. Friendson didn't say what kind of needle. Maybe the rest won't think of it." "Yeah," snickered Ronnie. He liked my bright idea, and he slyly picked up several long pine needles and tucked them into his backpack. I noticed that Booker and Racer were smearing more first aid cream on each other. Susie was checking to see if her pets were enjoying the trip. She even got Miriam to pick one up and put it on a rock in the sun. Immediately it changed to the colour of the rock. Hapford and Reginald were checking out the area with a list in hand. I was sure they had collected more items than any of us. I wondered if they had found a needle yet. Sandy and Christy were hunkered down at the edge of the mountain stream. They were splashing their hands in the cold water. I found out later that they were collecting pretty stones. AC and J. Michael were helping Mr. Friendson and Mr. Thriftmore unload their backpacks. Pastor Gentle was resting against one of the tall pines, catching his breath and flapping his hat in front of his face like a fan. He said there were some mountain trout in the stream, but Since he didn't have his fishing line and hooks, we wouldn't have fish for lunch. Finally, tweet! There was the whistle. Ready for hobo stew? Mr. Frenson asked, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. Yes! Are we ever? Bring it on! Whoa, not so fast, he said. The thing that helps make hobo stew so good is that everyone helps to make it. See that circle of rocks? We need wood to build a fire there. J. Michael and AC volunteered to go gather some wood and build the fire. They were surprised to find that the rocks were still warm. Someone had recently had a fire there. Mr. Frenson had no explanation at the time, but you've figured it out, haven't you? Mr. Frenson looked around. Racer, do you still have your super sport? Yes, sir, Racer answered enthusiastically, holding it up. Good. Here are 4 cans of tomatoes. You have a can opener, so we will let you and Booker open the tomatoes. Deal? Deal, agreed Racer. He had been waiting for a reason to use his super sport again. I need more volunteers, said Mr. Frenson. Here are a bag of potatoes and some paring knives. Who wants the job? We'll do it, shouted Susie, shooting up her hand. That should certainly guarantee that she would not have to do dishes. And I'll help them, announced Miss Content. It did seem like a pretty big job. Susie scooped up her pets, and Miss Content got the bag of potatoes and the paring knives. I really hoped no lizards would end up in the stew. Now, who will clean the carrots? Mr. Frenson held up 2 bunches that looked like they had just been pulled out of the ground. I was all ready to volunteer, but Ronnie looked at me as if to say, wait, maybe we won't have to do anything. It didn't matter because Sandy and Christy volunteered. It seemed they would do just about anything to get to play in the water. Mr. Frenson began looking around for other volunteers. Oh yes, I almost forgot. It is a tearful job, but who will peel and chop up some onions? He asked half apologetically. Hapford and Reginald, how about you? Yes, sir, they answered with less than the usual enthusiasm, but then Reginald remembered his chemistry. If we wash them in the cold stream first, they won't make our eyes water so much, he said, encouragingly to Hapford. Everyone seemed to have such great team spirit that I felt bad. Ronnie and I had not volunteered for any job. If Mr. Frenson followed the scriptural principle, and I was sure he would, Ronnie and I might not get anything to eat. He hadn't forgotten us, though. That leaves you, Ronnie and Pudge. You will be our cooks. Here is what you will need. He handed us a package of ground meat, a long clean stick with a very large empty tin can. How can we cook in a tin can? Questioned Ronnie. I was a little puzzled too. What's the stick for? I asked. We're making hobo stew, remember? Said Mr. Frenson. We're going to cook like hobos. The tin can is your pot, and the stick is for stirring. Pastor Gentle began to chuckle. Necessity is the mother of invention. Ask any hobo. We all looked at each other and began to laugh too. So this was hobo stew. We were going to cook and eat out of a tin can. I wondered what this stew would taste like. If the stranger in the woods had been there, he could have told us that he had eaten hobo stew many times, and not always in such a pretty setting. Hopping trains and living in a hobo jungle, among others who did the same, he nearly always cooked over an open fire, and had often eaten out of a can that wasn't as clean as ours. He hadn't always had such good things to put into his stew either, but he wasn't there, and what he faced was not going to be easy. However, he didn't know anything about that just yet. About 45 minutes later, when the coals were hot, everyone added their contribution to the pot. When our meal had simmered for just the right amount of time, Mr. Frenson dipped it up. It was the best stew I had ever eaten. Maybe because I was so hungry, and maybe because all my friends had helped fix it. Mr. Frenson had also brought along the leftover biscuits from breakfast. They were just as good as ever, and thankfully no lizard ended up in the pot. At least not that I knew of.